So we've had an incident or two over the past week that has now compounded into a full enough topic that I feel it's worth taking a look at the big picture and having a discussion on what it all means for the project as a whole. This includes both Star Citizen's future development changes, as well as the recent Bar Citizen scandal overseas that has a lot of people riled up at the moment. So as you may know, Star Citizen has recently made moves to expand its reach into the region of Asia, specifically the People's Republic of China. This means the current project, in all its glory and all its flaws of open development, may now be factoring in the input and the influence of the Chinese market. This was first evident during a Shanghai Bar Citizen in 2023, when Sandy Roberts dropped this gem on us.
And what about Squadron? Do people prefer to play that on PC or console?
What are you doing?
Now you may be asking yourself why this matters. And while it may not seem all that relevant on the surface, there is one apparent factor that looms overhead with the development of the game moving into 1.0 and beyond. So what is localization anyway? Within the context of gaming, localization can be defined as the process of adapting a piece of content for another culture, language, or region. This dates back to the dawn of gaming, with titles like Pac-Man coming to the West.
Hey, you know Pac-Man?
I know of him.
Well, Pac-Man was originally called Puck-Man. They changed it because, not because Pac-Man looks like a hockey puck. Pacu means flap your mouth. And that they were worried people would scratch out the P, turn it into an F, like.
This is a prime example of a major change being made to better suit a foreign audience. In this case, the West. This made a lasting change that ultimately turned the franchise into what we know it as today. But that was back when gaming was more isolated. Fast forward to today, and we play games together across the globe. Not only that, but games as a service have become the norm. Ongoing additions to games means there is an ever-present consideration of what can and can't be done globally. So where does China fit in? Well, as the years went on, fluctuations in Chinese policy and restrictions came in that drastically altered what was acceptable in the Asian market.
You see, games must be government approved to make sure they are cultural fit. From detailed game descriptions to source codes, the government checks everything, since games are dubbed opium of the mind.
As I'm sure many of you know, the gaming space of the modern age is primarily dominated by shooters and other genres that can have an inherent level of graphic content to them. This is generally fine in the Western world, but back out east, things are a bit different.
But when a regulatory shift kicked in, the government froze all game approvals for an entire year. Big games were blocked from making sales, causing huge financial losses and many new rules. Tencent had to rebrand it as Game for Peace, a patriotic, non-violent version to comply with Chinese regulations. Players wave goodbye instead of dying, and they emit light instead of blood.
The first time I can recall experiencing this firsthand was back in 2018. When a wave of sweeping changes hit the ever-popular game Rainbow Six Siege. Multiple maps within the game were altered to remove or change anything that was considered unacceptable by the Chinese market. This caused a huge uproar in the community, and received a lot of pushback, albeit unsuccessful. Here you can see side-by-side images of slot machines and neon signs being removed from the maps, among other changes. The alterations even bled down into UI elements. Ubisoft had stated that the changes are due to expansion into Asian territories, but fans have speculated on Reddit that the modifications are due specifically to the company's aim at the Chinese market. These changes weren't exclusive to a Chinese version of the game either. They were done universally for all players in all versions of the game. At the time, developers vowed that the changes being made would have no impact on gameplay, saying, quote, "We are adjusting art and visuals, but are not compromising what makes Rainbow Six Siege the game you know today," implying that these changes would have no effect on the gameplay itself. These retroactive changes didn't stop in 2018, however, with more reworks and censorship continuing for years to come. In 2021, the favela map was given a full rework, removing weed plants and meth labs around the layout, and altering the round-by-round flow of the map in the process, directly affecting gameplay. So the idea here was pretty clear. Ubisoft wanted Rainbow Six to have a single global version, so it would be easier to maintain and introduce new features moving forward. Ubisoft Montreal said it won't maintain two parallel builds, one for Western audiences and a China complaint one, in order to, quote, reduce the duplication of work on the development side. This will allow us to be more agile as a development team and address issues more quickly. So basically, they opted to do things this way so that development isn't bogged down by having to redo a system or an art asset just because it doesn't pass the charisma check in China. So my fellow Star Citizen backers, let's stop and think about that for a second. A single global version sounds a lot like something a game with massive server meshing tech ambitions would need in order to keep a game world consistent. Now consider the fact that Star Citizen is, as we all know, still a game in active development, with features regularly coming in and changing drastically on the fly as they do so. Think structural salvage, for example. Now, if CIG has to consider censorship overseas when developing something like, say, medical gameplay, they may think twice about the level of detail they put into any kind of drug use or surgical mechanics they may issue down the line, so they might have even more incentive to just stick to a beam. It's one thing for a game like Siege, where the changes essentially just boil down to map art. A game like Star Citizen, however, is still very malleable in its growth, and censorship concerns could end up reshaping entire pockets of gameplay. Let's consider something like gambling on the races in the windowed section of Grimhex. I know, imagine, but just bear with me. There's no way that would fly out east. And on the topic of Grimhex, just think about all the art around that place. The graffiti, the blood splatters, voice lines. They could all be at risk of being removed. Then the upcoming Pyro system in 4.0 is another potential spot of friction, as the entire star system is geared around lawlessness, and rival gangs vying for power around space stations and planets. We have more drugs out there, and even tattoos coming to NPCs and potentially our own playable characters. The last thing I would want to see are new factions being omitted or altered for the sake of global censorship demands. So what else has been going on with Star Citizen lately? Well, back on June 22nd of this year, Cloud Imperium Games traveled to Taiwan, a small country off the coast of China. This was for a Bar Citizen event in Taipei. It's also the current home of everyone's favorite space architect, who made an awesome video about the experience. Be sure to go check that out. During this event, a lot of very interesting, albeit unconfirmed, information about the game was revealed. Topics such as resource management, food and medical supply distribution on ships, a possible starter ship from Crusader that may be coming this year, and even more info about server meshing were among the topics discussed. Oh, and they crushed hopes for the BMM one more time.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
About a week later, SIG then traveled to the heart of Asia for another Bar Citizen, this time located in Shenzhen, China. Because make no mistake, CIG needed a whole new region of suckers to squeeze with ship sales. What they failed to realize is that the Chinese audience would be the ones doing the squeezing, as we're about to see here. Shortly after the Bar Citizen in early July, a post went up on the Star Citizen subreddit asking, "Why do we need to pay $1,000 for a dinner at Bar Citizen 2024 Shenzhen?" The Reddit user here goes on to say that he or she is an unpaid translator volunteer in the Star Citizen community to support CIG in the Bar Citizen 2024. They then elaborate that Star Citizen Lao A, the organizer and public figure of the Star Citizen Expo, is suspected of colluding with a third-party technology company in China to deceive the game company team, CIG. They kidnapped all the player contributions and kept it to themselves. The user put emphasis on the fact that this company both harvested the community's unpaid human resources, while on the other hand, they defrauded the sponsorship fees, while also squeezing the sponsors and continuing to make profits from the Star Citizen Chinese community. Basically, this event organizer deceived SIG and began charging attendance for the event, the most expensive package translating to about $1,200, all for what was supposed to be a completely free event. But it didn't stop there. The next day, another post from a different user gained traction on Reddit, with more details on the issue. He stated a brief history of the Lao A as well as shared more of the eye-opening ticket prices. The user also stated that they sold a seat that you can eat with Chris Roberts, and they didn't tell Robert. The user also noted that in the Shenzhen Bar Citizen, the environment is horrible. No air conditioners under 39 degrees Celsius. Some people were sent to the hospital because of heat stroke. They also added in the comments that a player donated about 300 water bottles, but the organizers sold them to the attendants for a fee, and he didn't mention anything about the player. Now, after taking a step back, Xylo actually posted about this on Spectrum back on the 23rd of June, stating, "We are extremely fortunate to have such an incredibly diverse and global player base, and the team is super excited to connect with our community in Shenzhen. Upon learning that the pre-event dinner was ticketed, we promptly requested it either be cancelled or offered at no charge, which the organizers kindly accommodated. We understand the organizers' efforts to support such an epic community-run event, which cost nearly 2,000 attendees, the largest of its kind globally. We know firsthand that organizing an event of that scale requires tremendous amount of planning and expense, and we've been blown away by the passion poured into this event. However, it's important to us to be as accessible as possible. After all, the primary goal of the Bar Citizen World Tour is to spend time with the community that makes all of this possible. For those attending, we'll see you next Saturday. However, despite this, it appears that the damage was done. Tickets were already purchased, and the event went on regardless. After which, the backlash went public on multiple Chinese threads, and eventually the main Star Citizen subreddit. As far as I can tell, it appears they told CIG that the event would be cancelled, yet still went along with doing it. Now, it begs the question, how did this happen? Aside from poor management by CIG, this really just boils down to the greed of this one organization out in China. Regardless of how you feel about Star Citizen, you cannot deny that there still remains a stigma around it in the general gaming community that the whole thing is a giant scam. Now, we the backers, we know better. Star Citizen is not a scam. Well, at least not nowadays. Players for the most part know what they're getting themselves into, and it's been long enough into development that you can see the progress and know that you won't be getting a finished product in the near future. And that's okay. The problem here is that Star Citizen's reputation precedes itself as an elaborate scam that has generated unfathomable amounts of money from its backers, and to a certain event organizer in China, it appears that fact did not go unnoticed. Now, to be clear, this is just one group of people, an event organizer that went absolutely off the rails, but you have to wonder why they would get this idea in the first place. Keeping in the spirit of things, this event organizer has doubled down on scamming the Bar Citizen attendees. Hopefully CIG takes action, and at the very least, blacklist these people from ever working with them again. I do feel sorry for anyone who fell victim to this, because it sucks. It also looks pretty bad on SIG, even though they weren't necessarily to blame. But it does make it plain to see that even across the ocean, Star Citizen cannot escape the stigma of being associated with a scam. Now, as for China's gaming industry as a whole, there is still one major concern. The industry in China has a habit of quickly copying and regurgitating the latest hit games and re-releasing their own versions almost immediately. Question is something like this even possible with Star Citizen?
Well, it boils down to their view of knowledge. You see, knowledge is seen as public good and trumps personal ideas. As a Chinese official once wrote, Chinese learn for substance, Westerners for application. Anyone can just copy them faster than you can say copyright infringement. Blizzard's Hearthstone, for example, was cloned within a few months of its release. Or take Honor of Kings, China's top mobile game. Its maker Tencent faces numerous lawsuits, especially with this one, which cloned almost everything from game design to characters and even marketing tactics. Marketing tactics? Can they even be protected? I don't know.
To be honest, I don't think anyone could swagger jack this game no matter how hard they tried. The tech was mostly built from the ground up, the server infrastructure looks like it's going to be bonkers by the end, and the backers already have so much money invested, they wouldn't switch titles if you paid them. Remember trying to say you were excited for Starfield before it came out? That's not to say it's entirely out of the realm of possibility though. It would be really funny if a Chinese clone of this game somehow popped up, but I think that's more of a threat that low budget and indie games have to deal with, not something as complex as Star Citizen. Expanding into China is going to come with some growing pains, but all we can do is the same thing we've always done. Cross our fingers and hope that everything works out in the end. Alright, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the flip flop. Peace out.